All right, we will now open up the budget workshop at 8 a.m. on August 24th. We're going to pick up where we left off on page 32, the sewer services plant. Whenever you guys are ready.
You want to do a roll call?
Yeah, we'll do a roll call.
Ms. Gray?
Here.
Ms. Sutherland?
Here.
Mr. Spurlock?
Here.
Mr. Bernard?
Here.
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Thank you.
The gang's all here. Again, starting on page 32.
Sorry, I'm sharing a book with Ronnie here.
Oh, no problem.
Emails back and forth, sometimes it's difficult to match everything up. So, the sewer disposal plant is on page 32. There are a number of different reductions as well as increases in this particular cost center. In addition to that, there is some information that we will discuss when we get to the 5-year CIP plan on improvements that need to be made to the sewer plant.
Okay.
And if you've had a chance to look at that, you can see that there's some pretty significant numbers in there.
Right.
All of those numbers are not included in here as of yet. I want to wait until all of those projects are approved by council, or council is in a consensus with those projects, and then go ahead and plug those numbers in. Because there's so many different variations that can come off of that, that I feel it would be an exercise in futility plugging the numbers in until we reach a consensus about, what is and what is not going to be included in there.
You talking about the CIP plan?
Right. And the CIP plan will impact your water and sewer fund, your the transportation, as well as the solid waste cost centers. And there's also another area in there where it will impact your infrastructure fund. So all of that funding has to come together for those projects to be able to fund those projects, as well as significant grants that have been applied for, but we do not have a firm commitment on those grants at this point. But anyway, we'll move forward through this.
Ricky, I have one question, just for the record. Under regular rate, salaries and wages, why is that base so much higher than the previous 3 years? Just for the record, please explain.
On the sewer service disposal plant,
Yeah, second line down,
second line down,
the base.
there are some positions out there that were required or are required by DEP. Those positions have been approved, and
So they're filled.
they are filled. And the reason they are filled is to avoid any, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Ronnie, but to correct any problems that might arise if DEP were to show up for a surprise inspection of the sewer plant, and those employees were not in place. We could be subject to fines and other sanctions from DEP.
Is that $204,000 worth of mandated employees?
It is that difference between what you see there, what was adopted in fiscal year 18-19, which is the current year we're in. That's the difference between 211 and 74,000. One of the specific requirements that was not being met was that that plant has to have someone there present at the plant that has the right licensure 24 hours a day.
We didn't have that in the past
No.
3 years.
No.
That's not 24 hours a day, is it?
You have to have someone on staff there 16 hours a day for coverage and/or 7 days a week. You had 2 employees. The DEP state law required us for that class of a plant to have a minimum of 4 full-time employee operators. So
they-
the budget is indicative of having 4 fully licensed operators there, but what we are actually doing, we've already brought on 1 trainee. So they're not licensed yet, but it's a cost savings to the city. We'll be able to train them. And we probably will look for another dual licensed operator. If we can't find them, we'll bring on another trainee. They'll operate and work under our current licensing. So it'll satisfy the DEP requirements, and they'll gain the exposure and the ability to gain licensure through the state after a year, 2-year period with the city. So it'll be a cost savings to us. But, it just depends on the market. Right now, they're in high demand and they're hard to get. They're very expensive if you can find someone. So
Thank
it's just cheaper to go with the training.
Okay, good.
Ronnie, I have a question along that line as well. Didn't we used to have people that we contracted with and came in and did it?
It's possible. I mean, it was before me, so I'm not aware of it as far as contracted operators for our wastewater plant. That would be dangerous. I'm not sure that I would want to do that.
Maybe it was the water plant and not the wastewater plant. Do we have contracted services that come for the water plant?
Not now, not for either. In fact, our operators actually govern both of them. So your operators that handle your wastewater plant actually look after your water treatment plants as well, because they are dual licensed. They have 1 in water and 1 in wastewater. So of the 2 gentlemen that you have there now, 1 stays behind while the other checks our 3 water treatment plants on a given day. And then 1 guy that's left behind is there to do the maintenance and take on the septage from haulers. So they're stretched pretty thin.
I have a question for you too, Ronnie. I had a citizen ask me the location of our water wells. I told him I thought we had 4, but I didn't really know their locations. Is that something you could email out to me, or?
Sure, I'll be glad to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else on that section?
Nope.
I just have a question on the professional services, on the increment recommended there. What is the expectation of that? What kind of professional services are you, is this engineering? Is this consulting?
This will be engineering and consulting for future projects.
And those are the ones that are in the CIP,
Yes, ma'am.
and they're not covered by a grant?
Well, it depends on how the grant's actually going to be dictated to us by the state, what it will or won't pay for. If we can get professional services covered, then we'll certainly use that funding for it. If not, we want to make sure we have it captured in our budget so we can pay those expenses out.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm just looking at cost savings of the, for example, the electricity. How did we get to spend less? Or actually, while the base is still, I guess, equivalent to the other 3 prior years, but you expect that to be lower?
If we are able to go in for the wastewater treatment plant and upgrade our process improvements, then those processes will utilize less power because they'll be more efficient. So that is going to translate into a cost savings. But I also looked at what we had spent up to, I believe it was July or August of this year, and also looked at the amount of funding that was left remaining in that particular fund to cover the power bills. So extrapolating that out forward, it looked like we were actually going to leave money in the account that we didn't necessarily need to use. So that's why I reduced it down on top of the cost savings that we anticipate from upgrading our processes at the wastewater plant. What I've tried to do, Council, and you'll see this throughout the budget, is I've tried to make cuts wherever I can to try to keep the budget as balanced. Now, that's not entirely possible when we're talking about upgrades for our wastewater plant. But I've tried to cut wherever I can to try to mitigate as much of that pain for those costs as possible.
Okay. Anything else on page 32?
Let's go down to the $40,000 reduction on replacement and maintenance.
Okay.
I'm always concerned about that issue, so tell us why you think that we're in great shape, great condition.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that particular one.
I'm sorry, near the bottom where replacement and maintenance, you have a $40,000 reduction.
Yes, sir.
What qualifies you to be able to do that? Because I'm always concerned about maintenance on our water and sewer. In 2017-18, actually, it looks like we used 67,000. Of course, this year, our actuals are extremely low so far.
That's correct.
I mean, you can use other funds for replacement and maintenance within that same budget. I mean, if you look at building repair and maintenance, well, there's only 2,000 in there. Other repairs and maintenance could be the same as replacement and maintenance. So, you know, one goes up, one goes down. In the end, it's the
So
same.
either way, we're covered, is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a $40,000 increase in the other repairs and maintenance and a $40,000 decrease
Oh,
in the
yes.
replacement with
I
a,
see
you
that, I
know,
didn't see
net
that
zero.
before. Very good. Yeah, I understand now, good.
Okay.
It's just moving the budget numbers, or I guess accounts.
We're just trying to put it where it's most useful.
Okay,
Anything else on page 32?
yep.
Page 33?
So I got a question in regards to the revenues. Where did I see, oh, maybe it was a CIP, that you wanted to purchase some land for the sewer plant, or at least for public works? Is that gonna be divvied up through different departments, or is it gonna be public works? I mean, wouldn't the sewer pick up some of that cost, because don't we get revenue from that?
Is that on page 33?
Yeah, because at the top of 33, it says land, and since this is an expense thing, there's a zero in here for land.
That's right, because we're not talking about doing that for this fiscal year coming up. It was something that was put in the 5-year CIP, just basically to put on your dashboard of future needs that are going to come about. Now, what we're talking about is the potential of acquiring a 40-acre tract of land directly adjacent to the existing wastewater treatment plant behind the armory. We would want to use the proceeds if we were to sell the 9-acre tract that we currently reside on. If we were to sell that to the college, we would take those proceeds and use it to help offset the cost of that property. It's something that's kind of tied around the future needs of the wastewater plant, because the existing property that the wastewater facility is sitting on, I don't believe is going to hold everything that we need to do because of some changes that have been made to it in the past. So with that in mind, it's either we need to acquire a larger tract of land to put all of Public Works and a future expansion of the wastewater plant on, or we leave Public Works where it's at, make improvements to that property, and look at the idea of putting a second wastewater plant further to the north. Right now, we're talking about transmitting a lot of the water and sewer waste over 6 miles to the wastewater plant. So as we continue to grow, those lift stations and those lines won't be able to carry that volume. So we're gonna have to start making a lot of radical changes to it. So in some regard, it actually makes sense to put a second plant further up toward the north. But the caution side of that is making sure that you've got enough material, enough volume coming to it to keep the plant alive. Now, what I'm talking about is from a biological standpoint. You've got to keep all those microorganisms fed in order to keep them alive and keep the plant functioning. So if you put a plant too far north and you don't have enough material coming to it, you'll actually have to import material into that plant in order to sustain it, to keep it alive. So it's something that we will be looking at over the next couple of years and we'll keep the council informed as to what's actually transpiring in the field and which direction we need to go. You know, do we need to do that locally, or do we need to move it north?
So if these 40 acres are attainable, you're saying it could be behind the armory or further north?
Right, the 40 acre, there's just
Right.
a nice tract of land there that's behind the armory that would be conducive for it.
Okay, so would the airport ever be considered for this?
We looked at the airport, but there's really not enough property for it. And I'm not sure the folks at the airport would want to smell it on a bad day. And if you ever decide to expand your airport, now you've got infrastructure that's too costly to move.
Would it require more of the ponds?
It will. The current ponds we have now are fine for the existing plant, and if we can improve our processes, if it is approved in this year's fiscal budget, we're going to expand our permit from 1.5 to 2 million gallons per day, which will give us the volume in the room we need for the next few years. And the ponds that we have will sustain that.
So the ponds that we have on the east side of Highway 27 that we bought by Davis Citrus, those are up and running and those are servicing well?
They're in
Right?
place, they're constructed, they're in place, but they've not been used.
Why not?
We haven't had a need for them yet. So they have not been used. But if we expand our permit to 2 million gallons per day and continue bringing material in and bringing on more, we will start using them.
So the hard pan soil has no effect on the current water retention? It's percolating just fine at the current location?
We took the small disc that was behind the tractor and we upgraded it to a larger disc. We went to a 24-inch and it was able to break through the crust. And so now the ponds are percolating just fine. So we haven't had to use it.
What did that cost? Buying that land where those new ponds, but you're saying the ponds are ready for future growth and whatnot. So if you build further north, how efficient would it be to keep those ponds that are currently not used that you don't need?
The ponds that we currently have that are sitting idle, we would use them at our current location. So if we expand our permit from 1.5 to 2 million gallons, that extra 500,000 gallons of your permit, you're gonna need those ponds for that. So those ponds will get used. They're not being used today, but they
Okay.
will get used in the near future. So if we talk about building another plant up north, you're gonna need percolation ponds up there. You don't wanna transmit all of that material down here for effluent. You might as well just leave your plant where it's at and expand it and pump the 6 miles, because you're gonna be doing it either way.
So the capacity of the plant at this point, I know this is all related even though it doesn't sound like it isn't, but the capacity that we have right now will be sufficient to receive whatever comes from the steel mill?
Correct.
So until there's exponential growth on the north end of town, then you're going to be looking at potential purchase of something then, or you're looking
Correct.
at something now for the next 20 years?
Well,
I mean, as it sits idle, then it's no good, and then you have to replace it, right?
Right. It's always prudent to try to obtain the property now while you don't have the need, as evident of the need for the easements that we just went through last week. We needed them, and we've somewhat got held over a barrel for it. I don't want the city to be put in that situation when it comes time to purchase property for a wastewater plant expansion when you're talking 40, 50 acres. So it's
Okay.
always better to have it now and have it sitting there idle doing nothing and available when you're ready to expand.
We spent roughly $1 million on those
Mhm.
new ponds, just so you know. Okay. Page 33.
Yeah, I have a question, I probably missed it, about the $125,000 for a tractor. Is that a four-wheel drive, air-conditioned cab?
It's a four-wheel drive, 100 horsepower tractor. And the reason we're looking for something so large is we currently have about a 75 horsepower tractor that holds what I call the sickle mower, or the slope mower. All of the weight is on the, if you were thinking about a car, would be on the passenger side of that tractor. It's too small and it's already been flipped over twice. And luckily the operator wasn't killed. It just cannot handle that much weight, so we're having to go to a larger class tractor in order to sustain that kind of weight in order to mow the slopes at the wastewater plant. So it is, those, when you start getting above that 75 horsepower, those tractors rampantly get more and more expensive. As far as your question about the enclosed cab, I don't know. I'll find out.
Is there any way any of this new machinery or equipment could be bought at auction or used?
I'm sure it can, Mayor.
I mean, is that something that you're looking at, or is that not something you want to do?
For the purpose of budget, we went ahead to the market and just got new prices.
Okay.
But if those budgets are approved, then by all means, we will look and see what we can acquire for the least amount of money possible.
Okay.
On the septic process facility, the 535,000, is that to rehab the existing one, or is that a new one? What is that?
That's to rehab your existing.
Okay. All of it? I mean, septic, the receiving station, the washer compactor, all of that is part of that?
Yes, ma'am.
And then the machinery and equipment, that's where the tractor is going in, and then the bat wing. Is the bat wing, that's for the airport, is it not?
It's going to be used for the wastewater plant and the airport, so it'll be used at various locations.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else on page 33?
No.
Page 34?
As we're moving to page 34, let me just mention that with your 5-year CIP plan, what's difficult to grasp with that is, even though it's a 5-year plan, the only part that goes into your budget is what you're anticipating for the next fiscal year, which is 2019, 2020. So you're just extracting that 1 year out to include in your budget for next year. Although those other expenditures, you're projecting that that's what it's going to be for future years. And as you move forward in time, you refine those projects as well as the amount for those projects. So I guess the best way to describe it is that you look at, you're looking at probably what your worst case scenario is out in year 5 as far as cost, recognizing that when year 5 gets to the point where you need to include it in the budget, inflation has occurred and those costs have gone up greatly. So you've got to include that inflation factor going out into future years. So that's why some of those numbers, even though they're big anyway, that's why some of those numbers appear to be very large out in year 4 and year 5 of your CIP.
Okay. Page 34.
Are of the savings that are in parentheses, are those going to be offset in another department that we don't see, or are those just true, no longer? For example, the recommended increment for facilities maintenance tech, those are being transferred to another department, just one is, or the other two going away? I mean, one has a little explanation on it, but the other two don't. Does that mean that those go away altogether? Or are they going to go to another?
They're not going away, they're just being transferred to other departments.
So all 3 of them are?
Correct.
Okay.
I will add that notation to those other 2 as well.
I mean, I'll remember that. I just didn't know if that was a savings or not. And then as you go down the list, also the other contractual service, there's another here for 180,000. Is that again for more engineering for wastewater services? In the increment recommended?
About 2/3 down.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, these professional services that you see, if we can cover this in the grant, we're going to do that. We're going to do everything we can to keep from having to pay out of pocket for it.
And this is that 80-20 grant?
I believe so.
So is the 20 allocated anywhere? I mean, that's the match. Where's the match coming from?
Well, you budget the revenue, and then anything above that revenue amount would have to come from the fund itself, whether it's from revenues within the fund or whether it's from previous year's fund balance that you carry forward into the next year.
Okay, when we get to the CIP, there's some areas in there that I wanted to ask about, but it relates to this, so I don't want to forget that. Okay.
Okay. Anything below the other contractual services line?
No.
Any other notes on page 34 from Steph?
I just had one on the travel and per diem of 4,000. What's the big expense there? I mean, that's a base. Right now, the actuals are 39, but that budget of 4,000 is a lot more than the last 3 years. What's that for? It's account 4000.
That's, I believe that's to maintain certifications within the department. A lot of your certifications, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, on this, a lot of your certifications carry some ongoing requirements for continuing education for individuals to have that. Plus, if you hire a trainee, you have to go through the process of making sure that they go to the proper training to be able to attain that regular status as a certified plant operator.
Mhm. Council members, we just sent 5 individuals to our maintenance of traffic classes up in Orlando earlier this week, and we also sent another individual out to Sebring for grants. So we're starting to reach out and get certifications for staff members. So obviously we need additional funding to cover those travel expenses if they're going to receive the training we require.
Okay.
So let me ask you a question. So that will that include the 4 full-time staff, licensed staff, travel for them that you spoke about on page 32? The regular salary person, and you said that was for them to do license and
It could, yes, ma'am.
it could be those?
Yes, ma'am, because if they can't do the license online and they have to travel to keep what's known as continuing educational credits, then they're going to have to travel to various classes in order to keep those licenses current.
Okay.
Anything else on page 34? Page 35.
The water meters, the difference there of the negative number on account 5251.
Reduction of 700K.
Right. In the past, council members, you have approved a $1.2 million allocation for the replacement of our water meters. But unfortunately, we just simply haven't had the staff to even implement a program such as that. So that money has just been continually rolled over year after year, virtually unspent. So I saw no need in us putting that kind of money out there for that when $500,000 is a more reasonable figure, given that we've brought on additional personnel. We'll actually start replacing a lot of the meters in-house. If you want to leave the 1.2 million there, then I would recommend we bring an outside company in to start in a mass scale, start replacing our meters. But I think that's going to cause some problems for your constituents when it comes to the time for them to get their water bills.
I'm sorry, can you speak up? No.
Sorry,
No.
it's, if we're going to leave the $1.2 million figure in, we would bring a company to come in and replace our meters en masse. But when we do that, that means you get a lot of paperwork at utility billing, new meter numbers, new ERT numbers, new readings, new everything. And unfortunately, it ends up translating into erroneous bills for quite a while. So that means your constituents are going to end up getting terrible water and sewer bills until that project were completed. So by reducing the amount of money and doing the work in-house, it means that we can be more consistent, it's done correctly, utility billing is kept up to speed, and everything moves along at a pace that's more conducive for everyone. It'll take a little longer, but it just means it's more accurate.
In the CIP, you have it over 5 years?
Yes.
And has that process been started already?
It will next year.
Okay.
We're in the process of training the meter readers and some of the new staff now for doing a lot of these change outs. And we've actually got training scheduled with Avanti next week, which is our supplier, on how to do maintenance and do change outs and recording the information. So we're getting ready for next year to do this.
Okay, because there has been some concern about the client's water bills being not read correctly. And I know a lot of them have been filtered into the city hall.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we've actually got several commercial meters that have not been read correctly, and they've actually been estimated, some of them for years. So we're actively changing that right this minute.
Is any of the equipment that you'll be removing or replacing, is any of that recyclable or sellable or
It's not.
parts?
It's not necessarily, well, it's recyclable because there's brass, if we have to change the entire meter and housing out, that can be sold at auction, or it can be sold to a scrap vendor. So we actually have quite a large pile of old meters now that we're adding to. We're just waiting until we get enough and to make it worthwhile. So we can recoup some of the costs, yes.
Not a lot, but something.
Not a lot, yeah, but something's better than nothing.
And then further on down, on the account 6310, water line extension miscellaneous, there's a negative 250 there, 250,000. It's still higher than 16, 17, 17, 18. I don't know that it got spent in 18, 19 other than 134,000. So I see you dropped it by 250, but what is that water line extension miscellaneous? What does that cover?
That is when we need to run a water line out to provide service to customers. So that's the call center that we use to charge that for. And again, we've had a limited staff, so a lot of that just hasn't been done.
So is the current year budget going to cover any not covered funding for the water sewer line going up to the steel mill? Or is that going to be in next year's budget?
We have a grant out there right now that we think, I would say probably 80% sure is going to get approved, that will cover the remaining cost for that line.
But still, the 20% is still going to be what we end up having to pay, and it'll be around $300,000.
I want to verify that, if you don't mind, with these individuals on Monday, as far as what our actual match is. I'm thinking some of these may actually be better than that. Close
Well,
to
it would be
100.
great. I did call the governor's office, and they did say that you could probably apply for another jobs growth grant, because Newcourt only put in their original grant application, I believe, 100 jobs when they're really bringing 250. So the balance of the 150 can be gotten for another grant.
Okay.
And it would just piggyback on the current one that you have. I think there's $80 million that DeSantis put out there, and it has not been spent yet, but people are starting to put their names on it.
Okay, we've applied for a $1,311,000 job growth grant already, so that's already in the hopper.
That's the first one.
That's, that's the one that, yes, we applied for. a
Okay,
month or
that's
so
the one
ago.
we already have. I'm talking about another.
An additional, okay.
Because what we have right now was applied for with 100 jobs. And that's how it was written. Had it been 250 jobs, you would have gotten more money. So there's another fund with DeSantis coming in, and that fund, if you call up there, they can tell you, and just keep on calling.
Sure.
And what they said was, if they submit for the other 150 jobs, then more job growth grant can come in, which doesn't have any match as the first one.
Okay,
So I remember sending an email about that, and I don't know if anyone had made the call or not, but it just needs to be pushed. And I know that some of the people at the Job Growth Grant Place say that it has been done before in other situations, so it's nothing new to them to go ahead and piggyback on a previous grant with another job growth, because there are more jobs attached to it. So that right there might be able to cover everything, including the match, if we have one, or if one of these other grants don't come through.
right, okay. We'll look into that on Monday. Get
Okay. The
started.
last money was from Scott, this money is from DeSantis.
Well, we just applied for one of those through DeSantis.
But not a jobs growth grant. You applied for a rural infrastructure.
Thank you.
Actually, we did apply for a job growth grant of 1.3 million and the rural infrastructure.
But the 1.3 million was the one from January, for the one that you've got right now, that you're spending right now for engineering and stuff, or are you saying there's a second one?
That one was for 971,000.
Okay, so you have a second job growth grant,
Correct.
and that one is a free and clear 100% paid.
1.3 million.
Okay, but that's not the 80/20.
No.
Okay, when did that one come in?
That one, we got a receipt of confirmation email on 8/12. It was actually applied back in July. And when we followed up with them, they sent us a confirmation that they did receive it.
Okay,
That's good
so that's
news.
DeSantis money.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question, and I don't want to know if this is the right area to ask it in. And I'm going to describe it because I don't know what it's called. You know, when the water run off of the streets and it goes into these little cubby hole things? There's a,
Stormwater.
Stormwater.
okay. Is there anywhere in this budget for us to repair those areas? I'm talking about that little iron thing that sits on top of it.
Great.
This is the one?
Great.
That's a catch basin, is what you're talking about. It's a manhole that we call a catch basin.
Okay.
And it's called a grate inlet. So if you have a grate that's missing, that's something we can take care of any day, every day.
Several on the
street.
south side has been identified
Okay.
to Robert, and he put little corn things around them. I remember one, but that's far as it went.
All right, I'll
So
follow
is there
up on that.
anything in this budget to repair, not only on the south side, but all over our city?
Yes, ma'am. We have money in the budget for that, so we can,
What line item is it? What is it called? That's what I don't know.
That's general maintenance there.
Huh?
That's maintenance.
Wouldn't that be in
Oh.
the streets department?
yes, sir.
That's-
Yeah, it'd be
It
in
would
the
be in the
street.
streets
Yeah.
department.
Yeah, because
Okay.
they're all over Delaney as well. There's
Okay.
one that I pointed out that just doesn't even drain.
Right. And two council members, I mean, this brings up something I need to talk to you guys about. We are moving ahead in our 5-year permit with the state for stormwater. And one of the things that they're pushing us to do is to provide maintenance of the catch basins, of the pipes, of the ones that don't drain, to make the repairs and upsize them, so as more infrastructure and buildings and so on get added to your city, more runoff is created and it overwhelms your existing system more rapidly. At some point, we're going to have to look at setting up a stormwater utility, because right now it's being funded out of your general fund, and you can't keep up doing that. You'll go broke. But it's something that we need to seriously take a look at next year. Like I said, you're at the end of your first 5-year permit. That's the easy stuff. The next 5-year permit is the very expensive part of the program. And it's a large federal mandated, unfunded program that everybody has to participate in.
Is there grants available for that?
0. Now, if I've got a specific project, I may be able to go out and get some Swift Mud money or something like that for a specific project. But to fund your department, the day-to-day, there's no money out there for that.
Got it. Okay. Where does the revenue typically come from?
General fund, or if you set up a stormwater utility, then there is a fee attached to an equivalent unit. And Ricky can elaborate a little bit on that as far as the different taxable units.
Is that something that people would pay in their water bills you're talking about?
Well, it depends. Most of the time, it ends up on your property tax bill. It's an annual assessment that's
Got it.
done. All residential properties, it's a certain dollar amount. Let's just say, for instance, $25 annual fee. But it's tied to an equivalent residential unit, much like your water and sewer is. And it's based on a number of square footage that you tie to that unit. So if you're a big company, we'll just use Nucor, for example, you've got a massive parking lot. Well, you take all that rooftop and parking lot and everything else and divide it by that unit. That's how many, you multiply that times your actual fee for that unit, and that's how you generate the bill.
But if they have a massive retention area, how do we, validate getting fees off of them when they've built everything per DEP standards and everything else? I mean, they're building their retention areas big time as well.
Correct. They can apply for what's known as a credit, in a credit manual that would be part of the adoption of the program. So first you do the ordinance, you adopt a credit manual, and you adopt a standard operating procedure policy. In the credit manual, it outlines for those type of companies what procedures they have to follow to apply for and receive a partial credit. They won't receive a full credit, but they will receive a partial credit. Depending on how the credit manual is written, most of the time, folks generally don't bother because it involves getting engineers and environmentalists to substantiate the claims that they're making in the credit in order to obtain it. And the impetus is on them to perform all of the maintenance on those ponds.
So what you're saying is stormwater, such as she's describing, that would be covered under this situation. But if our utility is doing well, and it's able to pay for it now, then this would just be another capture of funding from the public that you not necessarily would need because we have it already from the water from the utility.
Well, the water and sewer shouldn't be paying for the stormwater. The stormwater needs to be paying for itself. But right now, we as a municipality are paying for it spread across your general fund or the water and sewer.
Would that be for all old growth as well? Because I mean, if people that have had a house for 80 years all of a sudden have to pay for stormwater, that's going to be a hard pill to swallow.
It's, like I said, it's like $25 a year.
But would it be like the fire assessment, another assessment that we would be putting on the residents, on the citizens?
It just depends on how we frame it, but collectively, it's not a lot of money for individuals, but collectively, it provides the city with enough revenue to go out and do the repairs that are needed. So it really falls back to the council, you know, how do you want to pay for something that federally we're going to be mandated to do?
So you're saying this is going to be federally mandated that we have to have this assessment?
It already is part of the Federal Clean Water Act. You're already under a federal mandate. You're already in your first go-round of your NOI, your Notice of Intent under the national.
When did that regulation kick in?
Ooh, I believe it's in the 70s or 80s is when the Clean Water Act went out, but the federal mandate was late 90s, 2000.
What triggered us to be involved in that?
Your population. And as your population increases, so do the requirements.
Well, let me ask, would this be something that when the legislative body comes to visit, that if it's a mandate and they're requiring us to do it, that, you know, we look at them to say, hey, you know, you want us to do this and you're going to help us fund it?
I fought that battle twice before in Georgia and received
But we're
zero.
supposed to be meeting the legislative body, aren't we? You know, they're coming to the county. Why can't this be added to that list?
That's state. I'm not sure if we're going to have any federal representatives there.
Well, they could put in a good word.
Sure.
Every
Yeah.
municipality has had to undergo this procedure, this.
Well, but if it's been in place since the 70s and we haven't done it, so it's not like they're, you know, shutting us down.
Right, so the Clean Water Act's been around for quite a while, but the federal mandate for stormwater, that's probably been around for about 2 decades. And again, it depended on your population. And a lot of people try to avoid it at all costs because it's an uncomfortable subject to bring up with taxpayers. But at the end of the day, at some point, you've got to pay for it somehow. You either do it through sales tax, through your general revenue, or you create a new, somewhat sort of like an enterprise fund and fund it that way.
But if we're paying for it now, so
You're
how
not
does the
paying
general-
for it. That's what I'm saying. You've got a permit in place, and we're working in conjunction with Highlands County to do a lot of the easier public outreach and attending meetings and putting out brochures. That's the easy stuff. We've actually been putting aluminum badging on a lot of the storm drains along Main Street and other places. That's the low-hanging fruit, the easier stuff. It's when you start actually having to model the stormwater system, repair and replace pipe and catch basins and clean outs and ponds, that's when it gets very expensive and you cannot afford to do it through your general fund. We're talking $1 million a year type of budget.
So what you do, just let them sit and go right?
You either don't do the work and you end up being fined, and that will cause your water and sewer permits to come into play as well. They'll go after that.
Have we seen that happen, though, in Florida?
I'm sure it has, but I don't have a particular case in mind that I can relate to you.
I mean, a lot of drainage just, you know, comes off the football field, and that means that the houses would be paying for Memorial Field, and I just don't think that that's fair, that we would have to burden the house. I know $25 is $25, but nonetheless, you know, we have a hard time just raising the fire assessment. So bringing another one in would just, it would have to be a desperate moment for this council to make that decision, I
And
think.
municipalities are not exempt from the fee either.
No, okay, but still,
Right.
they're the ones causing a big problem. It's an old field, there's no retention area on the west side of it. All the water drains onto Delaney and goes straight into the lake.
I don't think the one football field's the problem.
No,
I mean,
I'm
it's
just
the
saying that's
thousands
just-
of homes that we have.
Yeah, it's just a small example.
Right.
Right. It's not an easy thing to
Yeah.
do, but I just need to make you aware of it.
Okay.
Okay. Page 36. Anything on page 36? It's not a huge amount there. If there are no questions on page 36. Page 37.
Okay. Okay.
Page 37, we have a crane service truck. Want to explain what that is and what it's used for?
Okay, so you have a new call center for fleet maintenance. We've got a new mechanic. He needs to have his own call center, and the fleet maintenance truck that you see there, that is a service vehicle that he will take out into the field to do repairs when things break down and we're not able to get it back to the shop to work on it.
I'm assuming this is much larger than the existing service trucks that we have with the smaller crane on them.
Correct. We've got one with the crane on. This one's going to have to be a little bit more substantial to lift some of that heavy equipment out in the field that we're using.
Okay. Any other questions on page 37? Seeing none, page 38. Airport.
The airport cost center, again, this is your enterprise fund for the airport that we're looking at here. The position that you see there is for a manager at the airport to be able to take care of the day-to-day operations out at the airport. Currently, that is handled by multiple people. Even it has even impacted the finance department because in certain times we've had to have an individual from the finance department to go out and do different things, to the point of actually when there was no one to open up in the morning and shut everything down in the evening, that individual was taking care of it. So we're looking at adding a staff position at the airport.
Do we still have that couple with the business acting as our FBO there?
Yes, yes.
So this is an addition.
This is an addition, but some of those duties would probably be changed to the airport manager as well. What I was looking for was somebody that could run the day-to-day and possibly do some marketing type things to help attract some businesses come in here, just let people know what kind of a little gym we've got out there with the airport. There's a lot of untapped potential there, and I believe if we found the right person for that particular position, we might be able to make a lot of things happen out there. It's a thought.
So David, so you're saying the airport manager will be doing that along with the people who we just hired to do that? The regular work week? I'm not understanding this airport manager's position here.
Okay. The FBO that we've got up there is doing some of the fueling stuff, some of the mowing and all that. This is kind of a little bit more than that from what I'm looking for. I would want to keep them. We didn't actually hire the
Yeah, I
FBO.
understand.
We swapped out some office space for them to do those duties. But it can all be defined as far as specific duties that we're looking for this person to do. It's basically an idea right now. I really think that we've got some potential out there to have somebody market that and run the day-to-day stuff. Right now, Danielle has to go out there and
Yeah.
log the fuel stuff and things like that. But anyway, and this can all be done, I think, with a different person out there.
I think that's a great idea because our airports have been in the red for a long time, and since we don't have a professional FBO operator out there, this would take over anything that the people out there who are helping us would actually do probably 75% of the work that an FBO operator would do, but which, like you said, is managing and marketing. And with proper marketing, I think we can actually turn the airport into a profit-making enterprise that people will love to fly into the airport and also then come and visit Avon Park. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, if we increase the traffic out there, but more importantly, increase the amount of businesses that are out there,
Yeah.
it'll eventually create enough of a critical mass that an FBO operator will want to take it on and actually want to do, everything out there, a professional FBO service. So it's unfortunately something that we probably have to do to get to that point. But what we're doing right at the moment is not really getting us to where we need to go. So we need to do some more.
And I do not believe it will be profitable for a few years.
Right. Anything else on page 38?
I would mention that down in the equipment area, there is an item there for replacement of the fueling terminal that is there. That is net of a trade-in that would be allowed a credit for the current self-serve unit that is there. Ongoing, you'll see backup in the repair and maintenance services, maintenance for the fuel farm, and then there also needs to be a yearly inspection of the fuel tanks done as well. So we've included that amount in there as well to be able to make sure that there's not any issues related to water getting in the fuel, those types of things. Just making sure that all of the filters and everything are taken care of, and that the pumps themselves are working correctly and are pumping the right amount of fuel.
Those
Okay.
are brand new, aren't they?
I'm sorry?
Aren't the pumps, all these fuel things, aren't they like 2 years old? 3 years old?
They're not extremely old. That's why there is a trade-in that's allowed on them. It has to do with the software that's involved with the system, and if Danielle were here, she could explain it a little bit better than I do. If you'll bear with me a second, I may have a document here that can explain it a little more.
I think the issue had to do more with the actual credit card use.
Oh.
It wasn't working properly. I think I recall Danielle telling me something about that a couple of weeks ago.
It does allow for a cell phone or cell access kit, and also allows web access because of that, so that she can check the status of
That's
it,
what-
or it can be checked remotely,
Okay.
as opposed to a person having to physically drive out there to check on it and see whether it's functioning properly.
So would
Right.
the airport manager also be doing the revenues for airport leases and things? Would they be setting up the contracts, or would that be going up to City Hall and people having to come to City Hall and pay downstairs, or could they do it there at the airport?
That's the plan, is to have most of that day-to-day
At the
stuff
airport.
taken out there by him or
Currently,
Which one is that new equipment you're talking about? Which line item was that?
the equipment is down in the machinery and equipment line item. That's the
it's on page 39.
Yeah,
Oh,
542.64.
okay. Okay, I didn't see that. I hadn't turned to that page yet.
Currently, Danielle does take a lot of the monies in related to hangar rentals and tie downs and things like that. So that is a function that's happening out of the finance office as well. I think many times Danielle does not know exactly what hat she's wearing at a particular point in time because she has to switch hats so often depending on the phone call that comes in.
Mhm.
She is doing a lot of different tasks. And that's why you saw the staffing request back up in the finance cost center for additional staffing in the finance office.
Okay. Anything on, anything else on page 39 or 38?
Nope.
Page 40, garbage and solid waste.
David, how many extra employees have been hired so far? I mean, we see a lot of salaries and wages. What is the number of hires thus far?
In the garbage department?
Yeah, well, I mean, here in this one, for example, it went from 240 to 327, at least just in the executive side.
You're on page 40?
Yeah, I'm on page 40. So, I mean, I see in the past it was at 323 and then 339, then actual's 240, and we're at 327 with the, 327 in the total. I see that there's no increment in there, but, I mean, if you've had new employees in there, it doesn't obviously show it as an increment, but has there been more people? I mean, I guess in the end, we'd have to look at that number. I'd like to see exactly how many new ones we've had. Because we've had quite a bit of extra salaries.
We moved 4 from part-time to full-time. Ronnie, can you help me out on this one?
We've only hired one new person at solid waste since I've been here, and that's the individual that's going to be taking over the second clam truck that we talked about in a previous meeting. So we are looking at bringing on a second person in solid waste to take over the front-loading truck that we also talked about, because we just have the one individual that's capable of doing that. And so we're going to bring on another individual to give that person a bit of a help.
In this current fiscal year.
No, ma'am, it most likely will be in the next 1920.
So they're not in here.
The one individual we talked about that's doing the clam truck, he's here now.
Okay.
He was originally hired to assist with the front load, but ended up taking over for the clam truck. So that's still left us with needing, yes, ma'am.
That's that truck that does that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So he's taking over that role, and so that still leaves me needing one more person for that front load, for the emptying the commercial dumpsters.
Do you have 2 people in that truck or just one?
Sometimes just the one, sometimes 2. So you've got one that's an operator, and the other person's out there raking up the stuff after he's picked it up or checking the piles. Sometimes, most of the time, we try to keep it as just one individual unless there's, some training of some sort going on.
Now, that's the position that Mr. Darrell Davis used to do when he was employed for the city, but there was only one person, and he got out and did the raking up and whatever. So now sometimes you have 2 people to do it now?
Well, like I said, Vinny is the person we hired for our front load operations on the solid waste trucks, but now that he's going to the clam truck to pick up the slack for the second truck when it shows up, he's actually been riding with Mike Qualls, training as well as doing training on the front load as a stand-in. So he's actually doing 2 jobs. He's a part-time front loader when he's needed, and he's a part-time clam truck operator when he's needed. So that's why sometimes you may see only one person in the clam truck on Monday, and on Tuesday you may see 2 people.
But you still need another person in garbage, is what you're saying.
Yes, ma'am. I still need
But
another
they're not
person.
in here.
They're not in there yet.
So we're just trying to keep up with the one clam
Well, I mean, if
truck
it's
we
not
have
in here,
now.
there's no increment, is what I'm getting at.
Yes, I
Unless they're
understand.
going to be hired this year.
Don't know if we'll be able to make that happen or not.
Okay.
Are we gonna run 2 clam trucks now when we get the new one in?
Yes, sir, we will. It's supposed to be here this month, so I'm hoping
Any
it'll be
day.
here this week.
That's what we're hoping for.
Yes.
Okay, what else on page 40?
This 135 on other landfill charges, that's going away. Third from the bottom up, recording, no, what is it here? Other landfill charges.
Because
mean,
of
it-
recycling, or?
I don't know, it's all over the place. It was in, just less than 5,000 3 years ago, and now all of a sudden, then it went up to 135, and now it's back to zero. What is that?
It probably had something to do with the hurricane, I would imagine.
Or Okeechobee.
And you'll.
Well, you see the regular landfill charges are 2 lines up.
Yes.
So you have the actuals of 212 and the actuals of 350. That 350 should have been the hurricane year, I would imagine. And then you budgeted for 250, but we've currently used 199. And they're increasing that.
Well, I mean, are you for sure on that, or is that? Are you-
Well, I'm guessing, I'm hoping they're gonna
He's
correct me if
correct.
I'm wrong. And then they're increasing that 50,000. So they're trying to go from 250 to 300, and then they're taking away that 135. So I would assume that's just a
Yeah.
switch around, basically. Is that accurate?
That's correct. And the tipping fees have actually gone up. They've gone from $40 to $60 in the last 2 weeks.
Right.
So we're actually looking for another way of handling the sludge hauling to try to keep those costs down.
Where do they take, where does it go? Is it the county?
Right now, it's going to the county.
Is this the stuff that used to go to Okeechobee?
Yes. Used to
So
be
is
out
our
wrong.
cost savings now our cost savings, or are now we gonna be going back to Okeechobee?
No, we're not going to Okeechobee. Whatever you may have gained as a cost savings for your tipping fee, you destroyed that savings in the cost of fuel and the
Going down
maintenance on those trucks
And overtime.
and overtime. So it was far cheaper to leave it at the county. I'm just letting you know that the tipping fees have gone up. That's why our costs are going up. But we're also looking at possibly maybe hauling it to Polk County if possible, or working out some other way that where we can do it ourselves internally instead of using an outside contractor to haul it for us.
But in the meantime, we're still taking it to Highlands County.
Correct.
We also increased the sludge that coming from other areas, they're bringing it to us. And we
Septic.
charge-
Septage.
Yeah, we've increased those fees?
Yes, we're still charging, right, and we're still accepting the sludge. Is that your question?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
He asked if you're gonna increase those fees.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, this goes back to the fee schedule. We need to look at it across the entire board. And so that will probably be increased, yes, sir.
Okay, good.
What else on page 40? Seeing none, page 41.
Another garbage truck.
Questions on the garbage truck?
So is one dying, and that's why we're buying a new one?
As part of your 5-year CIP, you have one each year for rotating it in and out. So instead of buying another massive 40 cubic yard truck that was purchased in the past, we're wanting to go with a much smaller 7 cubic yard, 9 cubic yard range truck that does not require air brakes and doesn't require a CDL operator.
Oh.
This will also allow us to get into and around a lot of your mobile home communities, RV park type communities that we're creating damage to the roads and some of their infrastructure
Oh.
because they're not built to handle a 40 cubic yard multi-ton truck. The turn radius is too big and they're just too heavy.
I think that's a great idea, actually.
Yes, sir. So we're going to actually look at purchasing this. It's a cost savings. It's cheaper than the trucks that we're currently buying, and it'll do less damage, and it won't require a CDL operator.
Good.
Okay.
David can do it.
Questions on that?
Well, that ends that portion of it. I just did have a couple of questions. Are you going to be replacing the GIS person? Manuel used to do that. Is there going to be a new GIS opening?
We've already hired someone as a trainee. So that's already been taken care of.
And then in terms of grants manager, I remember, David, you had said that the city clerk was going to be grants, but you said that she had never written a grant in her life. So are you still going to have to hire a grants person?
I don't know.
If I may, the gentleman that we hired at Public Works to head up our accounting and purchasing and things such as that, we have been tasking Andy with administering these grants that we've talked about earlier. So that's why I wanted to send him at David's request to go get training for the grants, because I want him to actually start writing grants, and if he gets them, to actually assist me with administering those grants for Public Works. So if there's another grant that you need outside of the public works realm, if you want us to take a look at it, we'll be glad to do that. We can just add it to the pile.
So he'll be going to that training?
He did Thursday.
He did already?
Yes, ma'am.
Where was the training held at?
It was out in Sebastian, the city of Sebastian. So he's already met with the folks from the state, and he talked with them at length about the grants that we currently have in the hopper. And they indicated to him, in fact, he sent me a text message to let me know that it's looking very favorable that we will be receiving those grants we've applied for. So if that goes through, then we'll receive close to $5 million worth of grants.
This is the position that Bonnie currently has as part-time, and she is retiring at the end of the year, so we're replacing that with a full-time position with this gentleman that's hit the ground running, doing a good job for us.
So will his job be writing all the grants for the city or just for the public works?
Right now, he's writing them for Public Works, but like I said, if there's a particular grant that you would like for us to look at writing, we'd be glad to do that if it'll help, the City Hall administration.
Well, they're all over the CIP, so.
I mean, if you've got one specific for the airport or CDBG or something like that,
You don't want a CDBG.
I don't. I've got enough to do.
Okay, anything else on the last page, 41? If
No,
not,
but considering it's part of the detail, I just wanted to hand something out because I said I would. This is relevant to the actual positions that are placed here in the budget. It affects several $100,000, at least to my math. I might be wrong, I'll just pass these down. Some of these things are already on the agenda for tomorrow. So when I wrote this up, that was before the agenda was actually done. 1, 2, 3.
You got it, sir.
I don't expect you to read the whole thing, which is why, take it home and then bring it back tomorrow, I guess, Monday for council meeting. He sent out the packet, so
Is this already in our agenda packet for Monday?
no, but I'll just, just a little quickie so that I'm not going to go into the details of it because you guys might want to read it and just assess your own thing. But I had asked David to place ordinance 1715 on the agenda for Monday, which it is. And as well as, there's already a resolution on Monday as well. They're requesting for a resolution for the FRS pension or FRS program. We already have a resolution on that, and I included that in here. I was up at City Hall on Tuesday and just sat there for about a half an hour and got this stuff out of record sitting there. Anyway, I just wanted to make a point that at the last meeting we had discussed, for which I had abruptly left, I had when a lot of things come into my head, I start seeing spots, and I literally have to leave. It's called my brain bites or whatever. But the point is this. Management has provided for executive level FRS. And according to our ordinance, any executive level position has to be approved by council.
Mm-hmm.
So whether they're modified or they're created, and I believe he created 2 or at least 3 new positions. One of them is already gone. It was a interim position. And those positions in and of themselves have to be modified and approved by council as well as their budgets. That's what makes them executive. So at the same time, I do know that the city manager is a compulsory FRS payment. It's 25%. Now, I had mentioned that I had these conversations with David a couple of months ago, and he said that he didn't. Had he told me yes, that they had FRS 25, then I would have given him this then. Because
Why
I
didn't you
certainly
give it
wouldn't
to
have
me
forgotten.
anyway?
So getting to the actual FRS, I included in here, which is on your little page 8 that I put on here. The city passed a resolution allowing, it was Resolution 1503, for the employment class of regular employees. That was general employees, that was everybody, excluding the fire and the police. There was no mention in there about senior management service. But the statute does say that you are allowed to create those positions. But the statute also says that the local agency employer, which is the council, I have the definition of that on page 12. Local agency employer is the governing body of any council, commission, authority, or other governmental entity created or authorized by general or special law. That's us. We are authorized to do that. So it is my contention that the city manager has created these positions without the council approval, has created them under FRS executive level at 25%, which equates to $56,000 in the first year, without any consent from the council. I just want to go in here as well. On the date of hire, for example, we had talked about the hiring of individuals, and I remember Mr. Spurlock specifically saying, you know, had raises been given? Well, it turns out that they were. We had an employee hired on the 31st as a manager. 10 days later, they're promoted to director. Not even a month later, they're giving a $12,000 raise, and within 4 days, they're made executive level along with all the other directors of the city, and none of them came to city council for approval in terms of their executive level. So I don't know where we go from here, and like I said, we'll be able to go more into detail if you guys want on Monday, because we have this ordinance on.
Today, we don't go anywhere because we
No,
can't
but
vote
this
on
is
anything
part
or
of your
do anything.
budget, and this is the decision that we make in terms of the details in here. And because Jerry's not here, we can't really go into the nitty-gritty of this, but
I'm
at the
assuming you
end.
spoke to him?
Oh, I've spoken to Jerry, yeah.
Did he issue you a written opinion on it?
No, he's going to
Did you request
request.
one?
No, that's not my prerogative to ask him for one, so he's gonna be here Monday. I'm probably gonna ask him Monday to do that. This has to be looked at by an expert, because at the end of the day, we're providing benefits that are not allowed. We're putting the cart before the horse is basically what's going on. And, you know, I know that he just recently hired somebody, and if they were promised this benefit before being hired, but yet, even though they may have advertised it with the newspaper like you're supposed to per statute, we are the local agency employer. We are the ones that set the tone of these positions, and we are the ones that set department head positions. He may request them, he may put them in writing, and if he modifies them, that's all great and well, but we have to see those in our little hands, and we have to approve those.
Right.
And
But
that
you-
was not done.
But even if that's the case, isn't it a rather simple fix?
No.
No, because
not?
we haven't approved whether or not we're going to allow 25%.
So why can't you fix it? Why
No.
couldn't it be fixed?
Because they're
It's simple
collecting
to
it right
fix
now. Because they're collecting it right now. So what are you going to do? Stop the payments?
Well,
Revoke
if-
the money?
If that's what you had, to do to comply with the ordinance, why wouldn't that be the case of what you do?
Because we could be sued.
Exactly.
Okay. But if it has to be corrected, it has to be corrected, so.
Yeah, and that's what I'm asking, that
It-
it be corrected. I mean, we can't do that. We need somebody to do it and tell us exactly what needs to be done. Hey, I may be 100% wrong.
I don't think you are, Maria, because
But-
I did some research on this myself, and there's a Florida statute in here, and it's a lengthy process to put from someone, and it has to come to before the council. And it's and I spoke with other executive officers.
Yeah, I understand of what may or may not have supposedly needed to happen, but I'm talking about, we're in the situation that we're in now. You
Yeah.
can't go backwards, you can't rewrite history, so fixing it seems pretty straightforward to me.
And what is your fix?
Well, I mean, we're gonna do everything according to what the attorney has to say, and what, I'm sure Brian Koji probably would have to be involved in
He
as
has
well.
not been talked to about this. I spoke to
But
him
I'm sure
this
he would need
morning.
to, because it's employment matters.
He doesn't do FRS.
But nevertheless, if we
The
got
point
sued
is
by an
that-
employee, he's gonna be the one that handles it, so that's. the
Not
person.
necessarily. I mean, I would recommend that we listen to what Jerry Buer said, and more than likely it would be David Miller from Miller, Olive, and whomever that he
Miller,
works with,
Bryant, and
because
Olive.
he's an expert in FRS. We can't fix this. This has to be done by someone that gives us the legal standing to do what we
Right.
need to do. So 3 of the employees that are in here got this benefit after they had been hired. So I don't know if they were promised this when they were hired, or if we're going to have to, worry about that later. I don't know.
Right.
We don't know what
We can't
happened.
do anything today.
No, but you all need to think about this, because this will be a decision made. And when I spoke to Jerry about this yesterday, he knows that we're going through the budget. So it has to be done quickly,
Right.
obviously.
Well, looking at this right here, the question I have is how did all of them get it on 4-1? 4-1, 4-1, 4-1, 4-1? That's questionable to me. How did that happen?
I don't know. That
How
was.
did that happen?
Oh, they advertised it. Someone advertised it. It takes 2 weeks to advertise it. You got to advertise once per week for 2 weeks, and then bam, it got in there. So how they got it, they probably went through the right process, had all the positions been vetted by council first. But what happens is no one read the ordinance and no one read the statute.
May I?
Yes.
Yes.
There was nothing that was done that can't be undone. I spoke with David Kent with FRS this week. There were no laws broken. I was authorized to sign that
By whom?
by state statute.
Can you reference
May I
that state
finish?
statute?
May I finish?
Go
Okay.
ahead, David.
All the designations are valid. All the positions met the criteria. FRS did not require anything other than the city manager or the plan administrator to sign that. That being said, any of this can be reversed by just saying we're taking them out of that status or out of that classification. In reading the thing that I signed, I fully acknowledge that I made a mistake. I should have brought that to council because it did say the agency. Based on my past experience, I thought that that was an administrative decision. So I fully acknowledge that a mistake was made when I signed that, asking those designations to be made as senior management. None of them were as a condition of hire on anyone.
Okay.
None of them. All of them were done after that. It was properly advertised in the newspaper. I wasn't hiding anything. I wasn't trying to slip something by. I made a mistake on the procedural aspect of it. I did not know what Ordinance 1715 was. It had never been pointed out to me. Based on the charter, it looked like I was within my rights to make those administrative decisions for the city. So, that being said, I made a mistake. I own it. I will correct it. I will put measures in place to make sure that it doesn't happen again, and hopefully we can move forward from that. But
So you're going to withdraw them from that status?
I believe I have to, but the council can direct me on that Monday night.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we want the, you
Yeah,
know,
that
we
would
want
be a
the
simple fix.
legal representatives to, make sure that we do everything
But that
properly or
being the
whatever.
case, if that's what you're going to do, then you still need to bring us their positions as their department head positions and see whether or not we reject or accept those department head positions with their established
Well, this
salaries.
is a workshop. You can go ahead and do
Yeah,
that
but I
right
mean,
now.
that's something
It's
we
not a
can do
budget
later.
hearing.
Well, the department heads are already established.
But we have not-
I didn't create any new positions on there.
The city clerk is a new position as a department head.
You've had a city clerk forever.
It
Which
was
it
a
wasn't.
function of a bigger position. It was.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it
Cheryl
was.
Tejan.
She did planning and zoning, she did a multitude of jobs.
She was
It
always
wasn't
referred
just
to
strictly
as
that
a
one.
city
And she
clerk.
was civil service. So it's a difference. She was on an hourly rate at one point, and then she was also civil service. So a lot of things have changed. It makes a difference.
But
It totally
for all
does.
functionality purposes, every person that you talk to in town, when they were asked, who's the city clerk? They would have said Cheryl Tejan. She's
Right.
the city clerk. That's
Right. And
what
so
she was
when
referred to
Manuel
as.
picked it up for an extra $20,000, are you
Yeah.
telling, it's a part-time job?
For
So-
him at that time it was, yeah.
It was for me as well, and for everyone else that's had it in the past. Now,
Okay.
he has an executive level city clerk. He put her in executive level because he intended for her to
Right.
have the executive level FRS. So he has created a department head level position. Am I right there or not?
Based on putting Manuel in that senior management class, I would say yes.
So, okay, if she's management level or executive level, then she falls under this criteria here along with her pay.
So we have to approve it as a council.
Yes, because that's what the ordinance says.
So why is that such a huge ordeal?
It's not an ordeal,
Right.
because it hasn't been done, that's why.
Right, but it can be done very simply.
I don't know why you're arguing. We
I'm not
have to do
arguing.
it. We're in defiance of our code right now.
I'm not arguing. It's just,
No,
it's
we're-
just
we're
made
just
to
in
appear
defiance.
that this is, the sky is falling, the world is
No,
ending.
it's not.
and it's
Well,
not.
it would have been had the corrections not been done. He's acknowledged that he made it a mistake. Okay, he just saved the city about $200,000 or maybe more over the course of time.
Where did that figure come from?
If you add it up over the course of time,
Add
but
what
also
up?
the positions themselves that have not been approved by council is the tally of the amount of money these individuals are making right now.
Okay.
So his, the job range is supposed to be approved by council. And that was designed because the charter was conflicting with the policies of the manual. So, it just comes down to people doing their homework. And like I said, this would have never happened had the conversation that I had with David, had he told me, yes, people were getting the money, I could have warned him and told him, whoa, do this, but he didn't. So that's why I left my meeting last week, is because I would have done this sooner.
Got it.
Can I ask a question,
Sure.
David? This is in reference to page 2 of our budget now, with saying all of that, in the event that it does not go the way it has been projected to be budgeted here, this would be corrected?
Of course.
Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just
We
want to
still
make
haven't
sure.
had a budget hearing, which is what we're gonna have
Exactly,
two
I
of.
understand that.
I would encourage you also, based on conversations with the FRS person, he stated that most of the municipalities have got senior management on those particular positions. I would ask you to consider having that status there. If nothing else, just for retention of good people.
Well, they're already here. They came here without it.
Agreed?
And I just think that we already have an incredibly rich program of benefits as it stands right now. And I, for one, will not be in approval of that. I'll just let that out there right now. I don't know how the rest of the council feels. I'm just one of 5. If you all want to do that later on, it's up to you.
Okay, is that it for the details portion of the budget? Seeing no opposition, move on to the 5-year capital improvement plan.
I was wondering if we'd be able to get an organizational chart as well when we get the improvement plan proposed.
Sure. What you got? Okay. Mr. Helms needs to be excused for a few minutes. Maybe we take a short break.
Yeah, let's just take a 5-minute break.
Perfect.